Okay, so now we're going to take a look at ROPS, FOPS, TOPS, and OPS. So rollover protective structure, falling object protective structures, tip over protection structures, and operator structures. So again, understanding that there are certain things on some of these that we can't use for others. For instance, a tip over protective structure isn't the same as a rollover protective structure. We can maybe use this on a tractor, so if it just falls over, it's not meant as a complete rollover structure. So we're going to take a look at the different ones of these. So how these are made, again, and what can we do if they're damaged? Well, if they're damaged, they've got to be repaired. And once they're repaired, then they have to be recertified by an engineer that they are good to go back onto a machine. So what this is about is they did a study, and this was in England, on the different pillars. Now again, what happens is moisture inside a tube will, as the temperature changes, as we were discussing in air conditioning, as the temperature changes, what will happen is any moisture will turn into a liquid and it will rust out the bottom. So what they found were 11% of the overall structures at the very bottom were poor because of condensation that got in there. So at the tops, only 2% of them were poor. It's just something to keep in mind when you're inspecting a machine that has some type of a protective structure. So this is a tip over protective structure. So it's manufactured so if this thing falls on its side, it's going to protect the operator from getting hurt. And again, if any of these are damaged or if it's rolled over, it has to be recertified. The other thing we got to pay attention to is we can't just weld to one of these structures. Most of these structures, they're made that they'll have a bracket on there if we want to attach a light to it. So just don't go inadvertently welding onto one of these structures, because now it's no longer certified. So tractor rollover incidents account for approximately half of all tractor-related fatalities across the country. Seat belts is another thing that's going to save a person. If they have a tip-over protective structure or a rollover protective structure, especially if it's an open cab, prevents the operator from coming out. It's going to hold them inside. So making sure that our seat belts are anchored properly and that they work, and use them. We also have to make sure that our seat belts are attached to our seats are attached to the floor. So for instance, in a highway truck, the cab structure itself is the rollover protective structure. But that does no good if this anchor is not attached to the floor, because without that, that seat can come off the floor. Now the operator is an object falling around inside the cab, which could kill him, or it could come out the window. This is the special bolt that they use for anchoring that seat belt to the floor. And making sure that you can put your gun on your seat belt. Okay, tip over protective structures, falling object protective structures. These are slow moving pieces of equipment. These will not handle a rollover, but most of the times these machines aren't working on an angle where they are going to roll over, but they might be working beside something that could have falling rocks. So this is meant to protect the operator from any falling objects. So this is a rollover protective structure, but again, if the operator is not wearing a seat belt, it could create a problem. Now when we get into a full rollover protective structure, so we have an anchor at the back here, an anchor here, we have an anchor at the front. So as this rolls over, it's going to protect the operator as long as he's wearing his seat belt. We also have guards around the machine that will help prevent, for instance, any material from coming inside the cab, for instance, a log or any component like that. So these rollover protective structures again are made so that these are rubber mounted in here, so any of the vibration is not going to wear out that rubber mount. The other thing that we have is they're made in such a way as they don't lose any operator visibility. And this is a partial. Again, it doesn't have the system that goes all the way to the front. It's set up for it, so it can be added later. You'll also see some machines that work in the bush that will have guarding around here, protect the operator from any logs coming up. And also there will be fire extinguishers mounted somewhere on there for easy access for the operator. And again, they're certified, so if it's damaged it has to be recertified. So we take a look at, for instance, skid steers. Again, they may have a front door on them. They also have safety systems built inside, so unless the seat belt's done up or the operator's sitting in the seat, the controls are ineffective, they won't work. And like I said earlier, there are attachments that are built in so we can attach lights. We just can't go and weld them anywhere we want. Now, falling objects, again, if we take a look at a truck, this here is going to protect the operator's cab from any rocks coming down when they're being loaded. And we have a ROPS on these. Again, they may not look like it, but they're built structurally so that they will prevent any damage. It'll probably wreck the cab, but at least it's going to protect the operator. Okay, like I said, fire extinguishers, where they're located on the machine so that the operator has easy access to them. So these ones here, again, you pull the pin, hit that, there's a nitrogen charge in here, which then goes to these ones and sets them off. Or they also have one outside by the step. One of the things when we're taking a look at fire suppression systems is each of these nozzles should have a cap on it to protect it from getting dirt in, because if dirt gets in there and plugs it up, it becomes ineffective. And these nozzles are positioned to spray at a certain point on, say, the engine for an engine fire. Okay. Last one we're going to take a look at is working attachments. And these are attachments that are attached to any type of machine. And not so much of how these work, but it's the safety thing is when we're repairing them, because these are abused pieces of equipment and they have a high maintenance factor. So we want to take a look at repairing. So for instance, cutting edges on a dozer or the corner bits on a dozer that have to be replaced. Number one is making sure that we support the blade properly as we're doing this so that it doesn't come down and hurt us. We don't want these lifted up off the ground and us underneath it and have someone in the cab hit the lever by accident and have this come down and take a leg off. So we talked a while ago about backblading. So these things use a plow bolt, and in behind this is a nut. Now if a person backblades all the time, we can't get at the nut, we got to end up cutting it off. So it takes a lot of time. But number one is safety. These things are heavy. Some of these are reversible, so you can take it off and turn it around the other way and use the other half. So again, catching them before they get to the bolts. Ripper shanks is another thing we have to be aware of because they're heavy. Now ripper shanks, depending on the style, they have to come out the bottom, so they're pinned at the top. Now not only is there a cutting edge here, but there's also a guard that runs up here to help protect the shank. So again, making sure that if this ripper tooth is missing, it may not hold the new tooth properly. So making sure that they're in place, and again, if we have to replace one, making sure that we do it safely so it doesn't hurt us. Same thing as when we're talking about cutting edges on a grader. If we got to replace these, we got to support this grader blade properly so that we can get these off so it can't come down on us. If we have a scarifier blade, so instead of just having a straight grader blade, we may have a scarifier on it, and that's for cutting on ice. So what it does is it just chews up the ice, puts grooves in it so that tires can stay on track. On our wing, again, if we have a wing on a machine, making sure that it's supported properly when we're changing cutting edges. So what can cause some of these? Well, there's a lot of different things, so I'm not so worried about what causes it. It's the safety factor of when we're replacing them to make sure we do it safely so we don't get hurt. Cutting edges on a scraper. Again, making sure that we support the scraper properly as we're changing the cutting edge. I already talked about rippers. Wear pads. Again, this is if you have a welder working, he's going to be welding new wear pads on. If not, then you might be. So again, as these things start to get worn down, they have to be replaced because we don't want to be replacing the bucket. Shovel teeth or bucket teeth again, or side edges that have to be replaced. Again, we want to replace these before they get down and wear out the adapters. Or if they come loose, will a new tooth hold on that adapter? Winches, again, we talked a little bit about winches when we were doing wire rope. Making sure that, again, that we do everything safely with the wire rope. If the wire rope is damaged, should be replaced. Is an overwound winch, underwound winch, the difference between those? And I believe that is it. Level 1 is now complete.